Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thank you for joining me in my craft room today. I am grateful to have you here. I'm going to be making 3 cards with Trinity Stamps today, and they're Thanksgiving Day cards, but all with the same color palette. I will be using the Autumn Impressions 4x6 stamp set and coordinating die set. I also have the Autumn Rainbow cut and foil die set and the gorgeous stamp set and its coordinating die. And I'm going to bring in a couple other supplies as we go, but these are going to be the main features of all 3 of my cards. So I'm going to start with a lot of prep before we actually assemble any cards in today's video, and I'm going to begin with some ink blending. I'm using some white cardstock and Distress Oxides with my little blending buddies, and I'm going to use, like I said, the same color palette for all of my cards today. So for the Distress Oxides, I'm using Fossilized Amber, Carved Pumpkin, Crackling Campfire, Aged Mahogany, and Rustic Wilderness. And I'm just going through and creating a kind of random colorful background with all of these colors. So I just pick a little spot to get started by adding some color, and then I'll pick a second spot not too close to add more, and then I will move on to the next color. So I started with my lightest, which would be the yellow. I moved into orange, and now I moved into a reddish orange, and now I'm doing a reddishy purple or purple red color, the aged mahogany, and then finally bringing in the green. And I'm going to go back and forth with the different brushes and try to create some nice smooth blending, but I'm not really caring too much if it's a perfect blend because I'm going to do some hot foiling on this background and die cutting. So now that I have all of my ink, I'm just going to splatter on some water. I didn't want a big concentration of water, so I sprayed the water into my hand and then flicked the water on with my other hand. So I'll set that aside to dry while I clean up my workstation, and now we're going to move on to foiling onto the background. I'm using some Spellbinders foil. This is the Speckled Aura, and I'm going to trim it to fit on this panel that I created with my ink blending. So I'm just using my Spellbinders foiling cut tool. I don't know the name of it, I'm sorry, but it's their like self-healing mat and their blades that you can use to cut foil and paper. So I just trimmed down my foil to fit on my background. Now I think that I'm able to get 2 sets of leaves from the Autumn Rainbow cut and foil die set. So I took out all of the plates and saw that I could get 2 sets, so I'm just going to trim my paper and my foil in half so I can run this through my hot foil machine or system to create some foiled leaves 2 times. So here is a look at my first set of leaves, and it's so beautiful. I love that kind of sparkly golden shine, making those details of the leaves. And then I ran it through again with my second one. And now I have the dies, and I'll go ahead and cut those apart and then run them through my die cut machine, and you can see how pretty these leaves turned out. I love them. I love the colors. I love the mix of colors because I created that random inked background. So those leaves are ready for one of my cards. Now I'm going to do some stamping, and I'm going to show you what I call the lazy way of stamping and die cutting. So when I have die sets that do not have another die inside of one of the dies, if that makes sense, I tend to just keep my dies together so I can die cut them all out at one time, and I don't need to use a lot of repositionable tape to keep it in place. So I lined up my stamps using the die, and I'm stamping with some brown ink that is alcohol marker friendly, and I'm using my Misty to stamp those so I can stamp more than once to get a nice clean image. And then I'm actually going to stamp again, you'll see when I'm all done, with a darker color. I don't have a dark brown ink that is alcohol marker friendly, so I'm going to do all of my coloring and then I'll stamp the different gourds again with the darker color, which again you'll see in a little bit. I am coloring in my different gourds now with my alcohol markers. These are Ohuhu art markers, and I prefer the Honolulu markers. And I'm going to show every color combination just once in today's video. So I'm going to start here with the green colors I'm using, and then all of the stems for my gourds will have a brown colored stem. Now again, I wanted to use the same color scheme for all my cards, so I know that finding reddishy purple gourds in nature probably doesn't happen. I'm not really familiar with my gourds, but I didn't really care. I wanted these colors, and I thought having a colorful rainbow of gourds would be really fun. So I'm just coloring what I would see in my fun imagination of some gourds. I just really like saying gourds apparently in this video. So I have a dark red combo, which to me kind of matches the aged mahogany color of my other background and my leaves that I just made. And after that, I'm going to go with a brighter red. I'm trying to match the crackling campfire. Now I do color this in, and as the alcohol markers dry back, it's a little brighter than I wanted. I want it to be more orangey, not necessarily more neon. So I will bring in another color in a little bit and make it a little darker. I'm also bringing in the classic orange for my pumpkin here, and I'll color my other pumpkin some other colors as well, like yellow and green. But of course I had to color one of them in orange for the fall holiday. And then other colors that I will use will be yellow, and I will bring in some brown. Now I wanted to use every color pretty much twice. So a couple of my gourds that have some texture to them, like the little knobs on a couple of my other pieces of produce here, I will use two colors. So that way I kind of use every color twice, even if it's really small in detail on the two last gourds that have the texture on them. As you can see, that is, or here is when I am trying to darken up my red gourd, I guess, a little bit more. And then the final color combination I'm using is a dark brown. I didn't really use dark brown on the first card, but I'm going to bring in some dark brown, kind of a bronzy colored cardstock for matting purposes on the first card, and as well as the rest of the cards. So just trying to bring in one more fall autumn color, which would be brown. So when I'm all done coloring, like I said, I have the die set for this stamp set, but I haven't cut the pieces apart. So that way I could just run this through with my machine. But before I do that, I want to show you my technique for adding a different color ink after you're done alcohol marker coloring, and that is with the help of a Misty or another stamping platform. I'm stamping them now with a dark brown ink. This is VersaFine Claire and Pinecone, and you'll see here it looks really nice and really clean. So I have that dark brown ink that isn't alcohol marker friendly, but I'm able to color with another lighter ink and then stamp it again with a darker ink. So I ran that through my die cut machine, and now I have my lovely little gourd set aside for my second card. For another card, I am going to be stamping these solid colored leaf stamps. This is the Autumn Impressions stamp set. And just like I did with the gourds, I stamped all my images after lining them up with the die and ran that through my die cut machine. I stamped all of those green different leaves on some cream colored cardstock, and I'm going to do some additional ink blending and splattering to create my backgrounds for my 3 cards. So I'm creating some just A2 size pieces of cream cardstock. This one's actually a little bit larger than A2. I cut this down to be 4.5 by 5 3/4, so I could use an A2 die when I'm done. And I'm just using the same color combination except for green, my Distress Oxides, because this will be the background of my green leaves, and I wanted to incorporate the rest of the color scheme onto my background, and then the green will come in with those green leaves. I love a good splatter, especially when it's shiny, so I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress Mica Sprays in the Antiqued Bronze color, and I'm going to use that on all 3 of my backgrounds. So once my ink blending was done, I went ahead and sprayed that mica spray, and I set it aside to dry. For my next background, this one is trimmed slightly smaller than A2. This is 4 by 5 1/4, and I wanted a text background, so I am using the background stamp from Trinity Stamps called Encouragement Text, and it's a 6 by 6 stamp set, and I inked it up with the Vintage Photo Distress Oxide, and I'm also going to be blending the edges and trying to kind of smudge the text. I just want it to look, to fill in my background more so than be for it to be red. It's more just a filler background, and I sprayed more of that mica spray and set that aside to dry. And my last one is an A2 piece of cream cardstock, and all I did was spray the mica spray for that one. So those will be the 3 backgrounds that I'll use with all the elements that I've stamped and hot foiled and die cut. So my first background is now dry, and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine with the A2, the largest die. And I will say I lost a little bit of footage for this card. I was having trouble with my camera, so please forgive that it might jump a little bit here, but I will go through the process of how I matted all my layers for this card on another set of one of the cards in this set. So for this one, I am going to layer the colorful background that I have with the brown bronzy cardstock that you'll see shortly, and then I am going to create a wreath, I guess you could say, look around my sentiment. So I'm stamping my Happy Thanksgiving stamp from the Autumn Impressions set onto some cream cardstock, and I'm going to use that as a guide of how I'm going to layer the green leaves behind it. And all of my green leaves will be glued to the kind of ombre, colorful sunset looking background with liquid adhesive, and then I will pop up the Happy Thanksgiving with foam adhesive. So here is where I'm about to lose some of my video, and I do apologize for that, but I will show you how I created these layers on another card. So again, just quickly kind of summarizing this card, here you'll see it right now all complete. I have my layer of leaves with liquid adhesive, my sentiment popped up with foam adhesive, and then I used some liquid embellishment in a pretty olive green color just to add some gloss, little pops of color around my sentiment. For the second card, I have my text background and all of my fun gourds. And this time I am adding my matte of that brown bronzy colored cardstock. It's cut to A2, and that will get glued to a card base. And I'm going to add my text matte layer to the front of that, or on top of the brown cardstock. So again, the brown cardstock is A2 in size, and my text background was slightly smaller, 4 by 5 1/4. And now I'm going to do very similar to what I did for the first card, but I'm going to layer my gourds above my sentiment instead of around my sentiment. And this is the same sentiment from the Autumn Impression stamp set. I stamped it with brown ink onto cream cardstock. And once I was happy with the layout of the different pieces of my gourd produce here, I'm going to adhere down the gourds that are more towards the back, so kind of further away, directly to the card background with liquid adhesive. And as I get closer to the front, so the yellow gourd on the left, the more redishy purple gourd, the smaller green, and I'm going to switch my 2 red and orange pumpkins. Those are all going to be popped up with foam adhesive. So I wanted to create, some dimension. The gourds that were further away from the scene that I'm creating are adhered directly down to the background with liquid adhesive, where the gourds that are a little bit closer to you in the scene are popped up with foam adhesive, just to give a bit of dimension. And here you can see all of those gourds layered on. And then I'll also add foam adhesive to the back of my sentiment, just using some foam strips. Very similar to the first card. This is exactly how I attach the sentiment to that card as well. I'm going to peel off all the release paper from the foam and then do my best to get it straight and centered onto my card background. So here you can see how it looks, but I wanted to add a little bit more shine. So I'm going to grab one of my pops of colors, but this time instead of a gloss, I'm using a glitter, and it is gold. I wanted to choose a color that I thought matched the shiny brown cardstock that I have as my back mat. And I like to tap those so they create more of an enamel dot look instead of that Hershey Kiss look that sometimes liquid embellishments get. And once it's dry, I will put it onto an A2 card base. For my final card, I'll show you how I did the matting for the first card as well. So I'm grabbing my A2 dies and I'm taking the largest die, and that will be the cream cardstock, but it's already trimmed to A2 in size, so I don't need to use it this time. The second largest in this set I used to cut the brown kind of bronzy cardstock I have, and then the third largest I cut a frame of the cream cardstock. So I'm going to glue the frame to my card base first, just using some liquid adhesive, and I am lining it up to the fold of my card and then making sure it's on straight and it lines up with the edges. Next, I'm going to adhere my cream panel to the bronze panel with just some tape runner. I'm going to end up peeling this off in a little bit, and I'll explain why when I get there. So if you're recreating this card, don't glue this down yet. And then to add this panel now to the card base, I'm going to grab some foam adhesive, and I'm going to add that adhesive to the inside of my frame on my card base. And none of this will show when I add my panel to the front of the card, but I just wanted to make sure my foam adhesive was flat and it didn't go past the frame that I have on my card base. I peeled off the release paper and then adhered that panel to the front of the card. So now I'm going to work on adding my leaves to this cream colored panel, and I'm going to just kind of create a pattern. And this is when I realized that I shouldn't have added it to my card base yet, because I'm going to have to trim some of these leaves down. So I'm going to very carefully peel off that cream colored panel, and luckily I get it off with no issues, no tearing. And I'm going to then arrange my leaves onto this panel by just putting them randomly, but yet still I wanted them to look straight, like they were kind of coming up and down the background. I didn't want it to be wonky, I guess you could say, or turned. I wanted a very clean look with my leaves because they're very straight looking. And once I'm happy with my layout, I'm just going to use my liquid adhesive to glue down the leaves one at a time. So I'm going to be very careful not to bump anything and just pick one leaf up at a time, add my glue, and then put it right back onto that panel where I picked it up. So it takes me a little time, but I think it turns out so pretty in the end. But I get all of my leaves onto that panel, and then I have to very carefully peel it off my glass mat. And my leaves have had some time to dry, so I'll go ahead and take my large scissors and trim off any of the excess leaves that go past that cream panel's edges. I'm going to adhere this back to that bronzy brown cardstock. So this time I'm going to use a different tape runner, and it's not coming off with this tape. So I need to make sure it's placed perfectly in the center and I'm not doing anything more to this panel. So I'll get that centered right back on to my card base. And for my sentiment, I'm just going to add foam adhesive to the back, just like I've done with my last 2 cards, and I will attach it to my card base. I don't do anything additional. I don't add any pops of color. I think the hot foil has plenty of shine and there's lots of fun color from using that distressed background and die cutting the leaves out of it. So here is a look at this 3rd card. I think it might be my favorite of the 3. You'll have to let me know in the comments which card was your favorite or more your style. So let's take one final look. Here is our first card with our ink blended background and our green wreath of leaves. We have our gourd card. I just think it's so fun coloring in all of those different images and using my imagination to color them in. And finally, our ink blended and hot foil and die cut leaves for our 3rd Thanksgiving card. I hope you enjoyed today's video and that you were inspired. I love this fall color palette and I hope you try it out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!